Welcome to this video guide on how to identify key opinion leaders using dimensions. My name is James Butcher and I've spent the past 25 years working in scholarly publishing, first as an editor at The Lancet and then as the publisher of the Nature journals. Today I'm going to show you how I've used dimensions in the past to identify key opinion leaders within a subject area. Now, I'd argue that this is an important skill for both editors and publishers because they need to be able to identify which researchers they should be actively engaging with. So, for example, you can use bibliometric tools like dimensions to improve the diversity of your editorial board by identifying academics from underrepresented regions. Or maybe you want to see which of the top researchers are publishing in competitor journals but not yours. Or perhaps you're working as a commissioning editor and you need a tried and tested method to identify potential authors of review articles. Before we move into the core part of the presentation, I should make it clear right from the outset that this video has been sponsored by Dimensions, which is part of the Digital Science portfolio. However, I've had full editorial control on both the topic and the contents of this presentation. My goal has been to create a video that's helpful to you even if you don't have access to dimensions. The methodology should be relevant regardless of which tool you use. This video is split into three sections. I'm going to kick off by showing you how dimensions can be used to identify prolific researchers, highly cited researchers. We'll then talk through how to identify researchers who are publishing in competitor journals, but not yours. If you're not already doing this, you're probably missing a trick, and I think you'll get a lot of value out of that section. And then finally, we'll discuss another common use case, deciding who to commission to write a review article. Let's kick off by using dimensions to identify prolific researchers. So here we are in Dimensions, and to kick us off, I've put together a set of filters, a set of search criteria to try and help us find articles related to cancer. So we're going to pretend for this demo that we are either a publisher or an editor of a journal working in the field of cancer. And just to talk you through what we've done in terms of the filtering, you can see at the top here, I've limited the publication years to 2022, 23, or 24. So it's a 3-year period to try and make sure there's enough content to analyze. I restricted the publication type to article, the document type to research article. And I've used the classification scheme that's inbuilt into Dimensions called the RCDC Research Condition Disease Categorization Scheme, which is used by the US Congress, and it has one of the filters is for cancer. And I've also added a dimension specific filter for what they call health research areas. So either clinical or population and society or health services and systems. But I haven't included what they call biomedical, which is the bench science research. So effectively what we're looking at here is clinical cancer research papers published between 2022 and 2024. And on the left, you can see the filters. So we've got the publication years I've set up here. This RCDC classification for cancer I've already done. I've selected these three for the health research areas, and publication type for articles, so that gets rid of preprints, and document type for research article. So just research papers, not editorials or reviews or anything like that, just research papers. So we're interested today in looking at researchers. So I'm going to click over to analytical views here, and it kicks you off with research categories, but let's move on from that and move to researchers. And what you will see here are a list of the researchers who have published the most papers, the number of publications in that 3-year period in the field of cancer. So you can see the names here, where they're based, the number of publications. If we want to, we could sort by number of citations. So let's do that. And you can see here now the list is changed. So it's the authors who have published papers that in total have been cited the most. We also over here have mean citations. Now we can change that, and I probably would, to median, since citations are highly skewed. It's better to use a median as a way of measuring the central tendency. And then so we have now still sorted by number of citations, but now the median citations. So, this is helpful in that it gives us a sense of which researchers are publishing the most papers, which researchers are being cited the most. But Dimensions allows us to do something extra. So let's pretend for the moment that we're interested in exploring which researchers from Germany publish the most cancer papers. Maybe we're, as the editor, you want to move the journal and attract more papers from Germany. So we can move up here and look at location, research organizations, country, territory. And then I'm going to click on Germany and click Limit To. And this then will filter this down to just papers with at least one author from Germany. Now, what you'll see is there are some authors here from Spain, which is a bit confusing. What this means is that this particular author has published 31 papers with at least one co-author from Germany. So even though they're from Spain, they've been working with German researchers. Now, if what we're interested in is just looking at how many researchers, looking only at researchers based in Germany, we can click this little tick box here, and now it will filter it down, and everyone on this list will be from Germany. You can see everything, all the authors now are based in Germany. So that's helpful. So we can get a sense of, within a particular country, which researchers are publishing the most papers in cancer and how frequently they're being cited. But we can take this a little bit further. Now, the heat map function is a really helpful thing that I use a lot in Dimensions. It always kicks you off with funders. You can see here, these are the same German researchers with different funding agencies here. Let's change that and change it to cancer types. So remember, we've done a search for cancer. And now what this is giving us is researchers from Germany and the number of papers that have been published on different cancer types. So Dimensions uses machine learning algorithms in the background to classify each paper based on the full text if they have access to it. And you can see now which researchers are specializing in, for example, breast cancer or colorectal cancer or leukemia. So you can filter it down and very quickly, using this particular filter, get a sense of which cancers each of these researchers are interested in. So that can be really helpful. One other thing you could do potentially is look at publishers. So now we have the same German cancer researchers with the number of papers they've published in journals for each of these publishers. So Springer Nature, Elsevier, MDPI, Wiley, Frontiers, etc. So you can get a sense of, at a publisher level, the relative strengths and weaknesses of each author in terms of where they're publishing. So looking at publishers is interesting, but what we really care about is looking to see which researchers are publishing in which journals. And particularly for the example I'm going to show you now is how to use Dimensions to see which researchers are publishing in top journals. So here we are back in Dimensions. I have removed the filter for Germany that we had before. And what we're going to do now is go back into Analytical View, go back to Researchers, and this time for the heat map, instead of looking at publishers as we did last time, we're going to go to source titles, which is, in other words, journals. And so what we see now are all of the international authors down here, going from left to right, and then the different journals that they've published in. So the numbers here are the number of primary research articles that they've published in each journal. Now these are showing large journals that have published a lot of content. But what we're interested for this section is which researchers are publishing in the top journals. So I'm just going to move us over now to another view of dimensions where I've changed the filters. So I've pre-done it just so you don't have to watch me typing and go through all this. So we've got, again, article and research articles. So we're just looking at primary research papers. But now the filter is for 3 of the top oncology journals. So we've got the Lancet Oncology, Annals of Oncology, which is published by the big European society, and Journal of Clinical Oncology, which is published by ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I've extended the time period a bit here over a 5-year period. But effectively what we're going to be doing here is looking at the researchers who have published the most just in those 3 journals. So I'm now going to go back to Analytical View, Researchers, and the names that you'll see here are the ones that have published the most articles in that 5-year period in those 3 journals combined. Okay, now that's interesting in terms of it gives us a sense of researchers that are regularly publishing in these top journals. So these are all very well established, excellent researchers who are regularly publishing in top oncology journals. But I think one of the things that is really helpful, and I've certainly used this at various times, both when I was a publisher myself and now working as a consultant, is using the heat map, or you can actually do it manually, and we'll talk you through a version of that in a bit. But looking at which journals these authors publish in. And this is where it gets really interesting, because what you'll see is there are some journals or some authors that prefer publishing in certain journals rather than others. So for example, let's have a look. We've got Leslie Robison here, who has never, according to this, in this 5-year period, published in the European journal Annals of Oncology, but has published regularly in JCO, the American Journal of Clinical Oncology, and a little bit in Lancet Oncology. There's another one down here who, Gregory Thomas, who hasn't published in the European Journal. So effectively what this is allowing you to do is to see who is publishing in which journals. So you could load up, for example, your journal with 2 or 3 competitors to get a sense of who is publishing in the competitor journals, but not in your journal. You can find out who your super fans are, the ones, the researchers that are coming back to you again and again and are choosing to submit to your journal rather than the competitors. So you can, make sure they get treated well. And it's this sense of being able to see where researchers are publishing at the journal level. Now, JCO publishes a lot of content. So, and obviously, because it's an American journal, a lot of the researchers are American. So one thing you could do, for example, is we're going to come over to here to location, to country. And what I'm going to do is go to USA and exclude those papers. So now what we're going to look at is authors who appear on a paper that does not have a US author. Okay, so effectively these are researchers based in Europe or the rest of the world, but they don't have, this includes the papers that don't have US collaborators. And then you get a different sense. So, if you're, for example, if you're editor of JCO, here are some lists of researchers who are not publishing in the American Journal of Clinical Oncology, but are publishing in the European Annals of Oncology, for example, and vice versa. So far, we've looked at how to identify key opinion leaders and to work out which journals they've been publishing in. For this third and final part, we're going to use dimensions to identify researchers who could write a review article. So if you're the editor of a journal and you need to commission researchers to write reviews, this section should be of interest to you. For the purposes of this exercise, we're going to pretend that we are the editor of an oncology journal who wants to commission a review article on breast cancer. So what I've done is set up some filters. So 3 years, 2022 to 2024 for publication year, cancer types limited down to breast cancer, the 3 clinical health research areas, and the document type, either research article or review article. So let's pop into analytical views, look at the researchers, and we can get a sense of which researchers have published the most research and review articles in that 3-year period. So Dr. Rugo here at the top, 108 research and review articles, mean citations of 38. So this is, similar to what we showed before, but for the 2 article type combines. But what I'm really interested in is looking to see which researchers have published a lot of research but not published many reviews, or researchers who have published a lot of reviews in the past as a proportion of their total output. Now, unfortunately, Dimensions using the inbuilt infographics can't help me answer that directly, but there is a right way around it, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So you need to use this export table function over here on the right, and that means that you can download 1,000 data entries at a time, so you get 1,000 different authors, and then you can play around with the data in Excel, and I will show you how to do that now. Okay, so here we are in Excel, and what I've done is I've downloaded 3 separate searches. So the first search I did was for breast cancer with what we were seeing before, so research articles and review articles. I then downloaded a separate set of 1,000 author names, but these are just for the breast cancer researchers who have written review articles. And then I did another search for research articles, just research articles. And that's what you'll see down here for review and research, research and reviews. So 1 sheet for each download. And effectively what we're seeing is a list of names, and in this case, the number of reviews that each researcher has published in that 3-year period on breast cancer. But of course, the magic happens when we pull it all together. So we have here Dr. Rugo, the same author that we had previously at the top from UCSF in the US. There was 108 research and review articles, you may remember, that was on there before. But now we can see that of those, 91 were research papers and 17 were review papers. So in other words, for Dr. Rugo, 16% of the article output is review content. And you can also get a sense of the median citations for research and review combined. So that's what this column is the median citations. So what we might be interested in, for example, is researchers who have published a lot of good quality research, but not many reviews. So these researchers, for example, let's go for Catherine Ruddy from Mayo Clinic in the US, 62 research and review articles, 60 research and only 2 reviews. So relatively few, very few reviews compared to the total output. So you might want to think about approaching researchers who have never written a review before, or very few reviews, because perhaps they've got an opinion that needs to be shared more regularly than a researcher, for example, who has published half of their content is reviews and the other half is research articles. You could take it both ways. Some people might like to commission people who've written a lot of reviews. I think there's a risk if you do that you end up with something that's quite derivative and quite similar to what they've written in the past. So what can we learn from what we've been through today? What are the conclusions? Well, this is my view of some of the takeaways from today's session. Now, the first point might be a little bit controversial, but I think good editors share many of the same qualities as good salespeople. They need to understand who their best clients are, their best customers, the best researchers, and they need to be able to engage with them in a fruitful way. So editors need to be identify leads, so authors to approach. And Dimensions can help with that. So it can help editors and publishers to identify, for example, expert researchers within a subject area. We did that today using cancer. You can look for experts from a specific country within a subject area. So we filtered our list of cancer researchers down to just researchers from Germany. And you can also, and I think this is a really helpful and a very, very powerful way of working out who you need to engage with, is to create a list of researchers who are publishing in competitor journals but not yours, because then you've got a list of people who you can meet at conferences, you can do desk outreach with, you can try and arrange telephone calls with, anything you can to try and identify who those people are who are publishing with your competitors, and to effectively to woo them, to try and convince them to publish with your journal rather than with your competitors. So in conclusion, dimensions can be really powerful as a way of identifying researchers that you want to engage with.